All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Itching to Vote. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are so honored to have our first Republican on the Itching to Vote concept, and it is none other than the one and only Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert is up in the house. Woohoo! Jane, welcome. Yes.
Good to be
so
here.
tell the viewers your district and everything else in terms of what area you represent, etc.
Caleb, I represent District 44,
Yes.
which is Sandoval County
Okay.
in the state of New Mexico.
Okay. Awesome. And you've been doing that for how long now?
Now 16 years.
Wow.
This is my 16th year.
So that means that you've seen, honestly, you've been through several presidents,
Yeah.
and also you've seen many laws that have been both sponsored and as well as passed over the years.
Yeah.
Correct?
It's been a journey. It's been a
Yes.
great journey. You know, it's been an opportunity that God puts in place.
Yes.
Because it's not something I could have ever even dreamed of when I started out. You know, I started out working in the community in Albuquerque back in 1963.
Wow.
And registering folks to put their children in this area's first federally funded daycare program.
Okay.
And so, but, you know, politics weren't new. I just didn't know they were politics.
Oh, okay.
You know, as a kid, you're doing whatever it is you do with your friends.
Right.
And it gave us the opportunity to get away from home.
Right.
And so if you know anything about the South Broadway area, it didn't always have infrastructure.
Okay.
It didn't always have plumbing, you know, and there were a number of parents that decided that we needed to have roads in that area. We had dirt roads.
Oh.
And that we needed to have indoor plumbing. We had outhouses in that area.
I wasn't here during then, so that's
It's
amazing.
long
A lot of
time
people.
ago, yeah. And they gave us a sheet of paper and said, go get signatures. And because we need to have that. And we got signatures from Central to Gibson, from what's now the freeway to the tracks. And so all of that used to encompass South Broadway area.
Now, would that be called in the political world, is that called canvassing, or is that like where you're going and getting signatures and things like that? Is it kind of synonymous to canvassing where you're going door to door, or not
Yeah, it
necessarily?
is, but we didn't know that that's what we were doing.
Right, and that's what,
You know, we didn't know that that's what we were doing. And it's
Right.
interesting how little things in life come back to help you.
Can you talk to us about some of your record, being as though you've been in office for a number of years now, in terms of just some of the bills perhaps that you've sponsored or have participated in and gotten through on behalf of the voting public here in New Mexico?
Well,
Anything that just stands out to you?
For me, and a lot of people don't realize that I'm a big infrastructure person.
Okay.
And I really believe that infrastructure, and we're talking about our roadways,
Okay.
and our plumbing and our electrical connections, they play a major part in the quality of life.
Okay.
You know, so I've really focused on business and infrastructure, quite frankly.
Okay.
The committees that I've served on during the legislature is the Business and Industry Committee and Transportation. Okay, and what we look at is we look at legislation that affects the business community. We look at legislation that improves our roadways.
Oh, awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
And so I live and represent District 44 and have been very involved in the, for example, the interchange at 550 and I-25.
Yes.
You know, and working with the transportation department, working with the town of Bernalillo, and quite frankly, you know, working with our district engineer and addressing some of the issues around that area. And what it did for that area, you know, we have capital outlay.
Okay. And
capital outlay is strictly a certain amount of dollars that you can bring back to your district.
Okay.
And it has to be used for bricks and mortar.
Okay.
It has to be used for improvement, for building, etc. And so I worked very closely with Bernalillo, but what it did for Bernalillo was it helped Bernalillo build a business corridor that they had been working on.
Okay.
And see, a lot of folks, you know, probably don't realize that New Mexico has what's called a gross receipts tax. And that gross receipts tax comes from the dollars that you spend at your local Walgreens, or at your Church's Chicken, or at your Pizza Hut, you know, or the dollar store. And a certain percentage of those dollars goes back to that community in which those stores
where you're
are
spending
located.
the tax.
So where you spend it, you can see your money improving the community that you live in. And that's very important.
Yes.
And so that's, you know, I carried carried legislation and brought home capital to address that issue in my district. One of my big bills that I was really proud of is I carried legislation for Union Pacific Rail. And that's down in Santa Teresa, down near Las Cruces. The governor sent it to me, I sent it back. She sent it to me, I sent it back. She sent it to me and says, I want you to carry this. And I said, okay, I'll carry it, but that's out of district. What I didn't realize at the time was the total impact that it was going to have on the state. And you know, I always like to say that I carried the anchor, because there were a number of legislators at the local level in Doñana County, and our federal folks who had worked on that for years. So I had the opportunity to be the one to bring it.
That is awesome.
You know, to bring it in. You know, and to the finish line. And for about 3 years, I understood the legislation, what was on paper, but I couldn't visualize it. And I could have never, ever dreamed of the impact that it's having on that community and on the state, because it's bringing so much money into the state. And what it is, for example, is Union Pacific could have gone into El Paso. Because the facilities and everything were already there. But they wanted New Mexico to provide them with certain tax breaks. In return, they provided jobs. And that rail system now carries products out of Mexico across this country. It provides jobs for that entire area.
Absolutely.
And Santa Teresa was a community that was, I kind of compared it to a Texas Dust Bowl. You know, and the first time I went to Santa Teresa, I thought, oh my goodness. You know? But now Santa Teresa has become an industrial complex that is affecting this nation. You know, and so to have the privilege to be the anchor and bring that in across the finish line, you know, it's going to be felt. You know, I'm proud of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only representative, Jane Powdrell-Culbert, doing it real big for the people of New Mexico. Yes.
I did that.
We are. That's just one. She's done so many. Jane, we have on our website, on the Itchin' to Vote website, we have a link that takes people to Ballotpedia. And Ballotpedia, they can search on your name or any politician's name nationwide and just see some of the track records, see some of the articles and things like that. And I just like to say, as a New Mexican, because I've watched you over the years and I was there when you ran your first campaign, and I just like to say I'm so proud and just so honored of the work that you've done over the years. You know, I would like to, it certainly is two issues that's going on right now as we're doing this interview. One is the immigration issue, but the other thing that I wanted you to speak about perhaps first would be, can you tell many of the viewers out there, and particularly the minority community, for many years they've grown up certainly with the Democratic Party.
Correct.
Things like that. And so there's been, many people that's been out there. For example, I can give one name like Candace Owens from Turning Point USA and others that have been advocating for minorities to consider the Republican Party. Can you tell the viewers out there some of the benefits of thinking about the Republican Party in terms of what it is that you all do, what it is that you represent? Because certainly with the Itching to Vote concept, our concept is to enlighten viewers and to enlighten them about, regardless of party, but in this case, since you are a Republican, you can talk to them about perhaps, just some of your experience or just, the paradigm of the Republican Party.
The biggest thing, and I can only speak for me.
Absolutely.
Okay. But the biggest thing that I realized is we're not taken for granted.
Right. Okay.
And one of the things that I always say to folks, in fact, prior to 8 years ago now, this governor's election, I met with some of the African American leaders, and my purpose for meeting with them was to say we as a people need to be included. And the only way we can be included is we've got to be on both sides of the aisle.
Right, absolutely.
In order to always have a seat at the table, we have to be on both sides of the aisle. And so when you look here, and I can speak, like I said, for New Mexico, when you look around the room, you don't see very many of us. In the Republican circle. On either side.
On either side, okay.
You don't see very many of us participating.
Okay.
I think there's a handful of us that you see quite often.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not many.
So it's not many, and so it's benefited me a lot.
Okay. Awesome.
But I'm not really your typical Republican.
Okay. Why do you say that?
And I say that because in the environment that I grew up in, you had to understand people.
Right.
And I don't get hung up. There's some things that you and I are not going to discuss.
Sure.
I'm not going to change your mind where you are religious-wise.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to change your mind where you are as it relates to abortion.
Right.
You're not going to change mine.
Absolutely.
But what we need to work on together is the improvement of that highway.
Yes.
What we need to work on together is educating our kids and looking at how our kids are being left behind.
Yes.
Now, is it the teachers? Is it that the kid just can't learn? What is it? I think that one of the things that we've lost is parental involvement.
Absolutely, I agree.
Okay, and it's not up to teacher to teach your child everything. Mom and dad has to play a role in that. So we push education really hard, and not so much from, because, the teachers' unions. I'm not a union, I'm not a favorite union person.
Okay.
And I'm not a favorite teacher person if you look at it from a professional or group expectation.
Right.
But I feel like the teachers are there to teach.
Yes.
And that counselors are important. But mom and dad, you need to send them a child that's ready to learn.
Absolutely.
And ready to learn does not mean that he or she should be in someone's daycare center from 6 months to 6 years old. And folks say, well, Jane, they have to work. My parents worked, your parents worked.
Right, but they still
put in the time.
And taught us values.
And taught us values.
They didn't neglect us.
They didn't neglect us. And so I think with the Republican Party, that's one of the things that we really push.
Yes.
That
is family values and things like that. Yes. And that's one thing that I do really love about the Republican Party. It seems like that the family structure in America has really been broken down over the years. And so with absentee fathers from just so many situations that's going on. And consequently, at the end of the day, the kids suffer. Exactly. And also, we have to be realistic. If we're going to talk about parenting and discipline, there is how do I say this? When I was growing up, my parents could discipline us.
Yes.
There's
interference.
It's almost like a hand ties of how much a parent can discipline their child without being incarcerated or losing that child. And so these children, oftentimes, they're not taught authority until they run into a police officer.
But also, I believe that if you start disciplining that child at a very early age, you know, that you don't have to deal with that.
Right.
You know? And you know that I don't have children.
Yeah.
But I
Neither do I, so.
But I did have a death in my family back in 81 and ended up with 3 little girls. I went from the happiest swinging single in the city of Albuquerque to a mother of 3.
Right. Wow.
And honestly, I did not know what I was doing, you know. And I'd been a community center supervisor, you know. I'd worked with daycare, but it's a little bit different when they're depending on you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And my girls are now 36, 38, and 39.
Okay.
And I said to them, I remember sitting down having a discussion with them when they were little, and I don't know if they understood it, about when Auntie Jane tells you to stop doing something, you need to stop doing it. You know? And to this day, these girls now are grown women.
Okay.
And there's certain things that they will not say or do in front of me.
Right, because of the respect.
Because of the respect, but we started out together, me struggling, you know, to provide for them. And so I really do think that, do I have anything to back it up? No, Caleb, I don't.
But they have grown up, and you know, the example of them.
About discipline, you know, and I think the entire time that I had the girls, which was almost 7 years, I can remember one time spanking them. You know, in our community, we say, give them the look.
Right. My dad had a belt that he could.
You know, and that's all you had to do.
Right.
But they were little girls when we started out.
Right.
You know, and I think that parents, I know that there's a big demand on parents.
Sure.
But if you decide to have kids, you have to decide to take responsibility.
Absolutely, I agree.
And be accountable for those little lives.
Yes.
And I think that's very important. So in the party, you know, we differ, you know, a great deal with the Democrat side of the House on that. There are a lot of things that we have a different philosophy on. But at the end of the day, for me as a Republican, it's about the quality of life.
Right.
And the environment in which that takes place.
Right.
And what makes up that environment. Quality of life in an environment means jobs.
Right. Yes.
You know, it means the means to get to and from work.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it means that having someone prepared, whether it's by them going to college, trade school, everybody's not college material.
Sure.
But having that individual prepared to take advantage of the jobs that are available to them. Yeah. And so, you know, when you say, well, tell us the difference between the parties, right now, everything's a big difference.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, what matters is the quality of life.
Absolutely.
And I think we're really focused on that environment, the quality of life, irregardless of what your nationality may be.
Sure.
And really irregardless of whether or not you voted for me. Right. I've had folks to call me and say, you know, well, I did not vote for you, but I have a problem. And my response has been, well, let's see what your problem is, and maybe that'll determine whether or not you vote for me next time.
Right, that is so true. Yes, going back to your point about the quality of life, one thing, I can just go down the list of some things that I've observed about the Republican Party. For example, pro-Second Amendment,
Oh.
And I have no problem with that, quite honestly. The Republican Party definitely, it seems like lower taxes. Would that be?
All of that's a part of quality of life.
Right.
Second Amendment.
Yes. Okay.
I'm a total supporter
High five.
of gun rights. I am totally supportive of it. But I'm also supportive of, if you decide that you're going to carry a firearm,
be responsible.
Be responsible and be accountable for your actions.
Yes, and go get some training.
And whether you get training or not, you know that if you use it, you have to be responsible for it.
Right.
Sure, we lower taxes, but also accessibility. Okay. We cannot make your quality of life better if you don't have the opportunity and the accessibility to those jobs.
Right.
So that you can own that house.
Yes.
So that you can pay that mortgage.
Yes. People come to America, and Americans that are here, they want that American dream, whether it be to own a house and things like that, and economics and things like that. And I recall back during former President Bush's, the latest Bush that was in office, he had made a speech about making sure that every American was able to get a house. Americans love things like that, to be able to get, someone can debate whether or not you can afford the house, but at the end of the day, people dream about being able to have and purchase their own home and having a good place to raise their families and things like that. And so, I'm all pro for that, and I think that.
And people forget that about Republicans because they get so caught up in all this other minutia, and earlier I mentioned history. You have to look back historically at both parties and look at where we've come with both parties. And, as you mentioned, to own a home. You cannot own a home unless you have a job. Right. You can't raise a family. I keep going back to that family value. You can't raise a family in a home unless you're employed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, President Bush says every American should have the opportunity.
Yes.
To own a home. And then we had an administration to come in after him, and the taxes, everything was shot up. People lost their homes. In Sandoval County right now, in my District 44, on average, we have somewhere around 6,500 to 7,500 houses that are in foreclosure.
Wow.
Because people have lost their jobs. And there were some, granted, that were transferred, but the majority of it because the jobs, And so you have to look at that, because when a new employee comes in and he says, "I'm here for life," before I say that, it has to be clear that business is in business to make money. People don't go into business just for the heck of
they're going into business
business
to make money and make a profit.
But in the mix of all of that, if I can hire you, pay you a good salary that will afford you the home that you mentioned earlier, for you, for your family, it affords you the opportunity to feed your family properly. It affords you the opportunity to spend time and help raise these, 2.3 kids that you have.
Yes.
And so we're all about that. I don't think it should be given to you. I think you should earn it.
Right, I agree. And that was one point that I was going to bring up, and I'm glad that you did. It seems to me, there again, I kind of go back to this because this is just observations from my perspective. It seems to me that the Republican Party is really about self-reliance or independence in terms of, having the ability or the internal ability to want to go out there and be self-sufficient, you know, whether it be working or just, so that's just an observation that I've observed with many in terms of the thought process. I know me for one, I'm about self-reliance. I'm about self-independence. I don't mind getting up in the morning and working my butt off so that I can, when I walk into a store, I can pay for it. I got dignity and respect, you know? And you know, when a person feels good about their self, you know, quite honestly, and they have job, they have employment, things like that, crime reduces.
It does, you know, and you have to, we believe that you have to create an environment to make those things happen. They don't just happen on their own.
Yes.
You know? You create an environment, the Republican Party create an environment to take care of Americans first. You know, and I said we're going through this whole thing with immigration.
Yes,
at this current time, you know. And I am of the Vietnam War era, you know. And I truly believe that all of our young men and women that have fought in these wars since that time, they did it for America.
Yes.
You know, and so if you're going to come into this country, I say welcome.
Right.
But I also say come in through the process.
I agree with you.
In my opinion, the fight that our nation should be having over immigration should be really about the process and how long it takes an individual who really wants to come here. How many hoops should they have to jump through?
Right, yes. Now, you know, one thing on the immigration side is that you're seeing that, okay, for example, based on just even what you were just saying, parents, and I'm talking about adult parents, because everybody's talking about how the kids are being separated from the parents at the border. Parents are making the decision, the adult parents, to leave their country. So whether they're in Honduras, whether they're in Guatemala, wherever they're from, and they're coming up to the Mexican border to cross over into the United States. You know, one can't blame them for wanting to come to America. However, we go back to the process, like you said, like, because we as Americans, if we go into another country, we respect their process.
We have to follow their process.
Right, and we follow the rules. And so the challenge to me, with regard to the separation of the children and the adult, blah, 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 at the end of the day, where is the responsibility? And it seems like the responsibility is from the parent. Before they leave their country to make that trek up to the United States, they understand whatever the risk is from leaving that country and saying, okay, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I guess what I would say is Americans, it seems like Americans have to be careful that we're not getting played, so to speak, where the child is being used as the pawn to say, okay, I'm gonna put my child, and people are gonna be, you know, they'll be compassionate because I have a child, to not to obey or follow the process. And it's easy for us to just look at the separation of the child from the parent, because I know I had that separation anxiety even when I was a kid. I'm you know, 2-3 years old, you know, if my mother took me to school, I was like, you know, you cry because you didn't want to leave. So I understand the trauma with regard to that. But in the same vein, it seems like the onus is on the parent to understand that, hey, there's a process that Americans have in order to come legally into this country. So
and that process is broken, quite honestly. And instead of fighting about who come here and who doesn't, we need to fix the process that they have to follow to get here.
Right.
Because certainly, you go into any of their countries, you're going to follow that process.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, there's no doubt you're going to follow that process.
Right.
You know, and so it's important that we follow. And then the other thing that concerns me in regards to that is there's a town west of Deming called Columbus, New Mexico.
Okay.
Columbus, New Mexico borders Palomas, Mexico.
Okay.
And women who are pregnant will come across the border, have their baby on the American side.
Right.
Them and that baby's picked up and taken to the hospital, and immediately they are registered and qualified for all the benefits that the American taxpayer has to pay for. And so they get their EBT card and set up their account so their welfare check can go in, and they come, once a month, pick it up and go right back into Mexico.
And that's gaming the system.
And that's gaming the system.
Yes.
And so we have to, look at our nation from a perspective of rebuilding. And we cannot rebuild our highways and byways by paying for every individual that comes to this country.
No, yeah.
I've served on committees with human trafficking. I've served on committees that have investigated, and looked at bodies being found stacked up in warehouses. And so I've seen a lot
I'm sure
as a legislator. Yes. I'd seen a lot prior to being a legislator, And back to you asked me why what the difference was, of being in the Republican Party and being in the Democrat Party. I've personally had some opportunity to do some things that I didn't even know existed. I was born and raised in South Broadway.
Right.
My mom and dad said, you graduate from high school, you don't get pregnant. They didn't say anything to me about going to Bahrain, Arabia, and sitting down with the king of Bahrain talking about free trade agreements.
And you did that as a Republican.
And I did that as a Republican. Yeah. They didn't say anything to me about going to Taiwan, and talking about free trade. They didn't say, Jane, maybe someday you'll get to go to Amilo, Netherlands, and go through an atomic energy facility. I didn't know those opportunities existed.
Yes.
And not that Democrats don't have that opportunity.
Sure. But this is your story. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story you're hearing right now, the story of a Republican. Yes. A Republican that has been a Republican for, hasn't it been over 15 years?
I've been a Republican forever.
Yes, a Republican for many years. So if you want to know, ask Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert.
It's been a great journey.
Yes,
it has.
yes.
It's been a great journey, and I've had an opportunity to see and visit. Caleb, I had the opportunity to go to a state dinner at the White House.
Woo! And visit and meet the president?
And sit down with President Bush. Now, whether you like George W. or not
but you
is irrelevant. I had
he was the president. Right.
To do that.
Yeah.
And my goal, like I said earlier, I don't have any children. But my goal is to do this well enough so that if some other little black girl comes along, a little minority girl comes along and says, I'd like to do that, I can say, this is what you're going to go through.
Yes.
Because it has not always been great.
Right.
I've heard a lot of the N-word.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've received a lot of those phone calls. But I made a decision as to whether or not I was going to take it personal. And that's their problem. It's not my problem, because the people in District 44 have elected me 8 times now.
Wow.
And they believe that I can do the job.
Yes. Well, you've demonstrated that.
Yeah, and I've done the job. And the other thing is that at the end of the day, the laws that I've voted on, the legislation that I've carried, it affects everybody in District 44, not just Republicans, not just Democrats.
Right.
And I look at it from the perspective that everyone that lives in District 44 are probably a big reflection of me.
Right.
You know, we work. I don't have children. A lot of them have children. But we all have a mortgage to pay.
Okay.
We all have car notes to pay.
Okay.
We all have all these things that we have in common. And so when I cast that vote, I pretty much feel like whether it's a Democrat or Republican, they probably feel about that law the same way that I feel about it.
Okay. That's
Okay, and see, and that's important. That is very important.
So you put yourself
in their shoes,
right.
and they're in mine, because we're all in that district together.
Right.
And it is my goal and has been my goal to represent them the way I'd want someone to represent me.
Absolutely.
Irregardless of whether I'm African American, Hispanic, Native, white, whatever.
Right.
You know, respect me and do as much as you can to make the community that I live in a better community.
Yes, that's awesome. So Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert, can you tell us about, in a world, let's talk about Me Too movement right now. In a world of the Me Too movement, can you tell us how, you know, what you feel would be the balance of what's fair to people that are in power, whether they're male or female, in terms of being able to get, say for example, an accused person is accused, they're in a position of power, like yourself, or over a corporation, they're a leader, someone comes back years from now or whatever and says this person did X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And I'm really asking you this as both a person that's in power, as a lady, etc. Do you have a feel for what the balance of, because there's been many men that says, well, you know, in today's world, we can just be accused and we lose everything. We lose everything on reputation without even due process. Could you speak to that? Because there's a balance, you want to look out for the victims as well, if they are, you know?
Well, you know, I don't think that there's a female out here that probably has not experienced sexual harassment in one form or the other. Self-included. Okay? And I think when we look at 25, 30 years ago, if a woman had have gone and complained or filed a complaint for sexual harassment, you know, she probably got nowhere with it. Because the judge probably had someone that he was doing that to. The lawyer had someone that he was doing that to. So there wasn't the environment where there was recourse. But in today's world, if that happens and you're insulted to that degree, I believe that you should do something about it right then. You know, and that there's consequences. You know, I've lost a job because I had to make a decision. Did I want to, or I didn't want to? You know, and I did not, and I lost a major account because of it. But I just had to stand by it. That's where, you know, and I just feel like that. If it's that egregious, then you need to do something about it right then. You don't wait 3, 4, 5, 20 years down the road, you know, to go back and file on someone, you know, and I just.
Especially beyond the statute, I'm talking about the legal statute of limitations and things like that. Because one thing, you know, culture changes too in terms of what's acceptable. So for example, like when I was growing up, even in the early 70s, people smoked on television. Nowadays, that would be, you know, totally shunned. You know, or things that societal things or social norms that would have happened in the 70s, or even say someone like Prince, how he was during the 80s. If he did that today, if Prince were alive or whatever and did that today, it would be shunned on. So to judge social norms by 20 or 30 years behind or before or whatever, to me, you know, And then also, I guess my thing is really about due process, you know, which it seems like definitely the Constitution gives us. I'm saying if you're going in a court or whatever, you know, you have the accused and the accuser.
Yes.
And both are able to go up under cross-examination, up under professional attorney, etc. But it just seems like many, particularly men, are losing lots of their livelihoods just on an accusation without all the evidence and things like that and cross-examination.
But men have to be careful.
Sure.
On what they say.
Oh yeah, I agree with you.
And I believe we as women, if a guy compliments you, you know, is that sexual harassment?
Is that harassment? I mean, do we have to get to the point now where if a woman walks past me, I got to hold my head down and, you know, I mean, what?
You know, and where does it begin and where does it end? And I can't answer that.
I understand.
But I do believe that if you are put in a position or a situation like that, and you're that aggrieved or insulted, then do something about it then.
Yes, it lends more credence and credibility.
Do something about it right then. You know, and guys have to think about it as well. Sure. You know, I mean, it's a two-sided issue. You know, and Caleb, I was raised with 4 brothers.
Right. Yes.
And so I'm probably not even as a state representative.
Because you have thick skin and stuff like that.
You know, because of the environment in which I was raised.
Right,
you know,
you're tough and
my mom used to say, what goes for one,
goes for all.
Goes for all 5 of you.
Yes, yes.
And so, you know, she used to say, well, mama's little man didn't cry. Well, I guess that meant me too, because she said what goes for one goes for all 5 of us. And so you, when you see me cry, you know, I am truly hurt.
Yeah, sure.
You know, because I'm not a crier.
I've always known you as a strong lady.
You know, and the environment, the times that I grew up, you know, both parents worked.
Sure.
You know, and I often tell the story about my younger brother. You know, when I was 8, I guess, when he was born. By then I was doing laundry, you know, and I guess when he and I were laughing about that recently. He was, you know, a little bitty guy, and I'd put him in the wagon with the basket of clothes and pull the wagon to the laundry on those cold days that you couldn't hang it up on the clothesline.
Wow.
And put the clothes in the dryer. Now, mind you, in South Broadway, I had to cross Gibson. Can you imagine an 8-year-old with a 6-month-year-old baby and laying in the back of the wagon?
Man.
You know, and so I came from a whole different environment.
Sure.
You know, and I've always had to be responsible.
Right.
You know, and so not being accountable, not being responsible. You know, I've had a relative to say, Jane, you're old-fashioned. Well, so be it, you know. Yeah. Because I've had to be accountable and responsible ever since I can remember.
And there's some good things about being old-fashioned. I mean, the great values. I mean, honestly, I believe that was some of what President Trump meant would make America great again. You know, going back to some of those old values that we have. You know, there's people that will debate and say, you know, hey, we had X, Y, Z going on during the 67, but talking about in terms of the values, in terms of the American family and things like that.
And also we have to look at the fact that this country was built on the back of American workers, whether they were immigrants or not. Those who came from so many other countries, you know, came in, followed all the rules, and built this country. They built this country based on rules and regulation.
Yes.
What makes that so unimportant now?
We need order.
You need
and we
order.
need laws.
And we need laws, you know, we need for that to be followed, you know, and when you look at some of the other international stuff that's going on, we have to remember that a lot of the industry, you look at Motor City, you look at the automotive industry, was completely shipped out of this country.
Right.
You know, look at all those families that lost jobs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and if this man doesn't do anything else but create an environment and put people back to work, it's worth the journey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because that impacts our prisons. That impacts our kids.
Oh, yeah.
That impacts everything that we do. And some folks, there's a group of folks here in America, any place else, but I know America, that wouldn't work if you set a job in their lap.
Right.
But, you know?
Right.
But that's not most of America.
Right.
People want to work. People want to be productive.
Yes.
And that's what I see a lot of his efforts.
Right.
You know, is to put Americans back to work. Because if we put them back to work, that's less money we have to spend on prisons.
Yes. Yes.
You know, that's less money we'll probably have to spend on teen pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because there's supervision.
And on SNAP programs and
on
other
all
things
those
like that.
programs,
Yes.
all those government programs.
Yes.
And so, now, I feel real strong about some of my Republican values, you know.
Right. Yes.
And I just
I'll be honest with you, I like some of the Republican values.
You know?
I do. I mean, that's why I'm listening. You know, certain ones that, you know, I just, you know, certainly I grew up in a two-family home, so I'm really all about pro-family, you know. One thing I was going to ask you, and then we'll get ready to wrap it up, is can you say a word to voters out there to encourage, whether it be young voters or people that are already registered, to get to the polls to vote? Because if you want to let them know when the election is, this coming up election, et cetera, to make sure that they get out there to the polls and actually cast that ballot. And then the second thing after that will be, tell us about your campaign and how people can get a hold of that, et cetera, to support you.
Well, before I answer that, I started on this a little bit ago.
Okay.
Here in New Mexico, on the last governor's election, I had a meeting with African-American leaders. And I said in opening up, and I guess probably about 20, 25 people showed up. And I said that I knew that I was the only Republican in the room. And I knew most of the folks in the room, and I knew some were more conservative than others.
Sure.
And I had that meeting because I want our folks to know that we have to be involved in the process, the election process.
Right. Yes.
And what I wanted to happen that didn't happen is I wanted these folks to take and go and sit and have a discussion with the Republican candidate and the Democrat candidate.
Yes.
So that no matter who won, we would have a seat at the table.
At the table.
And they would appoint, you know, some of our folks. And I don't care whether it's Democrat or Republican.
Yes. Yes.
But that they would appoint them to sit on these boards and committees.
Yes.
You know, because the voting process is very important. You know, it's very important for our young people to get involved and to get registered to vote and to be involved in the process. Volunteer for someone's campaign.
Yes.
You know, take the time to make a donation. You know, and don't expect, there's two of us African Americans that are in the legislature right now, Representative William Stapleton and myself, you know, and District 44 comes first, okay, because that's where I'm elected from.
Right.
That's where they expect me to represent
Absolutely,
them,
you're going to
you know?
represent them, right.
And the same with her district, okay?
Right.
And so they can't, every single solitary person has a state senator and a state representative.
Okay.
Okay. They need to know who that person is.
Okay.
And follow what that person does so that you can get registered to vote, vote him or her in or vote them out.
Right.
We need to get involved in the process.
Right.
Because if we're not involved in the process, then we can't, we don't have anything that we can raise sand about.
Yes, and they need to be present when these meetings and different things like that,
really
and issues that affect their campaign, you know, even before, quite honestly, the legislature starts, right?
They need to be involved. We start our interim season. You know, it started in June.
Okay.
And there are, I think, it might be more than that, but I think there are 17 committees that represent every aspect of what makes up New Mexico.
Okay, okay.
And those meetings are open up to the public. I've said this time and time and time again. If this meeting's in your area, then attend it.
Okay.
Because it's a combination of House members and Senate members.
Okay.
Okay. And so if your issue is that road, then your senator hears it and your state representative hears it.
Okay.
Okay. And if your issue is, I don't know, let's say your issue is welfare.
Right.
You know, welfare is an issue in every district, but we don't know what particular, what's an issue in your district about welfare may be different in someone else's.
Okay.
But what we do is when these issues keep coming up, it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican, we get together and say we need to develop some legislation to address this
issue.
And then that piece of legislation is supported by some House members, and it's supported by some Senate members. And it's more likely to get passed through both chambers. If
everybody's kind of on board with it,
because if it's a problem in the eastern side of the state, it's probably a problem in Gallup and Grants if it's a problem in Hobbs.
I see.
And so the legislators and the senator from Gallup Grants say, hey, we need to address this. The senators and the House members from Hobbs, Carlsbad, Ortegas say, we need to address this.
And so the way it works is...
And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican.
I see.
We come together and the legislation is developed.
And it has to pass both
and it has
houses,
to pass the House.
And then the governor signs off in order to make it law? Okay, that's the way it
And the governor has to sign off to make it law.
Oh, okay. And so what happens is during the legislative process, that's when it's presented for the votes and things? Is that kind of?
It goes through committees during the interim season.
Okay.
Okay, and then let's say I decide that I'm going to carry it.
Okay.
Okay, then I have a bill drafted. And I get as many other legislators to help me support it.
Okay.
And then I present it. It usually goes to 2 committees during the session. And then it comes to the floor. It's debated on the floor.
Okay.
And then it goes over to the Senate.
Okay.
And you work with the senators on that side to make sure to push that it gets heard in the Senate. And it goes through 2 committees.
Okay. And then all this is happening during like that 30-day, but the setup of it was prior to the sessions.
In June, or
right?
Started, you know, and we have our interim season until December, mid-December.
And then by the time that session goes, that's where votes, and if it passes everything, then maybe, you know,
maybe the governor will sign it.
Right,
you know? And that's not a guarantee.
Sure.
At least it's addressed.
Right.
You know?
That's awesome, because that's the first time it's been explained, like here on the Itching to Vote, kind of how the law kind of works in terms of how the lawmakers create legislation to ultimately get it passed and it becomes law.
And we pay attention to what the constituents are saying.
Okay.
We pay attention also to what the lobbyists are saying.
Okay.
You know, but neither one outweighs the other.
Oh, okay.
Because see the lobbyists, you know, I mean, face it, the lobbyists, the companies they represent, we pay attention to that.
Okay.
But sometimes you might lose that company's sponsorship because you totally disagreed.
Oh, okay.
With that.
When you say sponsorship, meaning that the company may be smart to the, I see.
Donate for us to get elected.
Right,
let's
I
face
see
it, there's not a legislator in this country.
They all understand. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Let's keep it real.
They don't.
I mean, at the end of the day, campaigns have to be funded.
They have to be funded and they have to be paid for.
Right.
And I love doing this. I enjoy
this is really interesting.
But I'm not going to sell my soul to do this.
Right.
There's a line that and in our side of the aisle, in our caucus meetings, we fight about who's going to support this, that, or the other. And there's just some things that it's not even about whether it's Democrat or whether it's Republican. It's about me.
Right.
And there's some things. And I couldn't spout off it's this, or this.
Sure.
But there's some things that I wouldn't support if I were not in the legislature.
Right. So there's a balancing factor. You have the lobbyists, but you also have your constituency.
You have your constituency.
And both carry weight. But then also at the end of the day, you really are the decider as the representative, in terms of, you have to, kind of like a judge, you have to
decide the risk that you're willing to take.
All that. Yes, that's interesting.
You have to decide the risk that you're willing to take. And I've had some great legislation. I have. Like I mentioned, Union Pacific, Another program that I just like to mention that has benefited a lot of kids is the STEM program.
Oh, yes.
And it started off with a lady by the name of Deborah Johns. And this was in 2002.
Okay.
And this was before everybody was talking about STEM. She had these little guys, that she was teaching science, math, and all of these things too, And now that's 16 years ago. Many of those kids have gone on and finished college, are in some very, very good positions. But they started out with that program.
Okay.
She came to me and asked me my very first run, if I won, would I put money into her program? And it's been funded now for 16 years.
Wow, that is
and
awesome.
We've had a lot of kids to go through that program.
I never knew that story. Yeah.
And so I've funded the STEM program, which is now under the Health Science Center at the University of New Mexico. And they've got these kids, and they come up to the legislature during the long session and go before the education committee and talk about composting and what it takes to make it and what the worms do and all the scientific stuff,
And that's planting those seeds, getting those seeds, and you see the fruition. They can be the next Mark Zuckerbergs of Facebook and things like that.
We've got some that have become pharmacists.
Yes.
We've got some that have become engineers. We've got some that have become educators in science, in math, in technology.
Yes, that is
and
great.
So I'm very pleased, and I'm also pleased to say that.
See, now it's coming.
that 1 year, the Republican side of the House came together, and we put over $500,000 into that program. Okay. And
into the STEM program?
Into the STEM, into Debbie's STEM program.
Oh, wow.
And so when you start talking about the Republican Party, you can't just base it on a single individual, because there's a lot of us that work together. So I just wanted you to know about the STEM
that is great,
program,
and quite honestly, minorities and many, all types of people have benefited from that program.
From that program,
yes.
I didn't say, well, his parent has to be Republican,
right,
or her parents have to be Republican.
Right.
All I said was, good luck with you guys, and use the money well.
Yes. Oh, that is
so that
great.
We could keep funding.
Right.
And so far, it's been funded now for 16 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert. Oh man, just amazing, ladies and gentlemen. I have so much respect for this lady. I remember when she first started running for office, and now, you know, many years later, she's still there, and the election is getting ready to come up in November, right?
In November.
So can you tell them how they can get a hold of your campaign, or
they can just call me.
Okay, just call you.
Just contact me.
Okay, people that know you.
Yeah,
okay.
people that know me and people who want to donate.
Okay.
I receive donations.
Okay, no problem.
From folks.
Sure.
You know, and I've had some folks that say, well, let's keep this between you and I.
Right.
Well,
right,
he's a Democrat, you know, or whatever. Or she's a Democrat.
Okay.
But the fact, you know, for me, I'm just so proud that they believe in me.
Yes.
You know, that they're willing to donate.
Yes.
You know, their $5,000, or they're willing to donate their $10. And I did a fundraiser one year called Friends and Family. And the biggest, you know, I got big contributions. But the ones that were most heartfelt was I received them from the little old ladies out of the neighborhood in South Broadway. And it was a $20 bill, a $10 bill, or a $5 bill rolled up in a piece of paper in an envelope, and when you open it, they said, "Janie, make us proud."
Oh.
You know, see, and those are the things that touch your heart,
Right.
and those are the reasons, you know, that I keep working hard at this. I don't want to disappoint them, you know, but I'm human. All politicians are human. We all do stupid things, you know, because that's just a human factor.
Absolutely.
We're not perfect, but it has been my goal to work hard to get elected, and once elected, to be able to do
you deliver
a good job,
Absolutely.
You know, and bring back what is needed for District 44. But on a national basis, I served as the national president for the women's program for the National Council of State Legislators, you know, and worked with women from around the country, you know. And as I mentioned earlier, it was a team of us that worked together to go to Bahrain and to go to Taiwan and to go to the Netherlands, you know. And it was both Democrats and Republicans, you know. And we've worked together, you know, on a national basis. You know, I'm pretty proud and to be able to have had that opportunity.
Absolutely. Your record stands for you.
And so I'm asking for your vote. If
Yes.
you live in District 44,
District 44,
Sandoval County,
Sandoval County,
I'm asking for your vote.
Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert. And is there anyone that you want to say hello to, send a shout out to, or, you know, just friends, family, supporters, or whatever?
Just
everyone.
You know, not so much a shout out, other than you know, more so a thank you for allowing me the honor to serve as their state representative.
Awesome.
You know, these 16 years. It's been a joy. You know, some days were tougher than others. You know, but what an adventure!
You still look so young, like you just started out. But I know you've learned so much, and just so much wisdom that has been obtained. But just the milestones and the accomplishments that you've made on behalf of people of New Mexico, and particularly District 44.
And you know, and I'm willing to share it.
Yes.
You know, for someone who truly wants to go down this road, we all started somewhere.
Yes.
And if you would have said to me 25 years ago that I would have been in the state legislature, I would have just died laughing, because that was not my interest, you know. And I've had, you know, some great employment that has played a major role in my success as a legislator. You know, and you know, full disclosure, I worked 7 years for the NRA. You know, which was a great experience.
Second Amendment.
Yes, Second Amendment. But you also learned, what I found out was that in some parts of this country, the only way folks can put meat on their table is hunting.
Oh, okay, right.
You know, and there's some areas where people, you know, they close school for 2 weeks for the salmon run, you know, for hunting season, for this hunting season, that hunting season, because it's so important. So, you know, here in New Mexico, guns were never a big issue until here recently. And so I didn't realize when I started working for the NRA that it was that big of issue, you know. But you have to be accountable and responsible. I worked for Buick. I wrote and produced TV commercials and radio commercials and designed paper, newspaper ads. You know, I worked for the police department. I worked for the city of Albuquerque.
And also for
the state fair.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert, she did such an awesome job with the New Mexico State Fair. My goodness, you did a tremendous job.
We had a blast, you know, and everybody enjoyed it. And that's, you know, it's always my goal, you know. I mean, I can find a little humor. I'm a little different. I can find a little humor in a lot of stuff. But it's important for me to be able to allow young people, as we did at the state fair, to be able to participate. You know?
And express their talent. One thing that I really loved about your leadership with regard to the state fair was you were really true to the principles of win-win. You know, people that worked with you, they won as well as the state fair. So everyone won. And that's one thing that I really loved about your leadership. You know,
and we all had a great time.
Oh, we had a blast.
We had a blast. You know?
We got some great footage from back then, and blah blah blah. But you've carried that same sentiment into your job as a legislator. You know, creating those win-wins and getting accomplishments.
And you know, Caleb, it's important to mention that we're not paid. We're not a paid legislature.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of folks think that we are.
Right.
So I still work.
Right.
You know, and
but that's really serving, huh?
Yeah.
I'm saying serving as a legislator.
As a legislator. You know, people think we make all this money. We do not.
Right.
You know, we get a per diem and we get mileage. That's about the extent of it. And so it's not a money-making venture for me.
Okay.
You know, and so I know how to do it. I learned, and I always tell folks I've got fingerprints all over me. As soon as someone finished with me, God has blessed me to have someone else there, and they passed me on. And so
one would ask the question: if you don't get paid for it, then why would you do it? I mean, I imagine a viewer may be thinking about that question. Why would a legislator go in and serve? Maybe you can answer that.
I think just the fact that you can serve, and that you see there's a need.
Right.
You know, because I can't tell you, you know, that I do it for the pay. I don't do it for the pay. There's no pay. But I think that I have made a big difference. In lives of folks who probably would have never. How would I say it? Who would have never had any representation? You know, I mean, the
just like with the STEM program, as you mentioned.
You know, and giving them the opportunities and the exposure. I had a young girl that someone, you know, asked me to give her and her family a call, who graduated from high school in May, this past May. I met her 3 years ago, and brought her to the legislature and introduced her to everyone in the house. She was my guest for that day. What made it so important was that her family was an average working family, but this young girl was the 10th highest score on the SAT in the nation.
Wow.
And she graduated this past May. I went to her graduation, and she had $280,000 in scholarship.
Wow.
And the one that she chose to go to Notre Dame.
Okay.
And she, you know, and I was so proud because she was this young black girl, you know, who's extremely smart, obviously. But this is one of our kids.
Right.
You know, and that's why I do this.
Awesome.
Because there's a lot of these little folks out there who are not exposed.
Right.
You know.
So you let your light shine so that others are able to.
So that they can do that.
Yeah,
you know, so that they
shine.
know what I'm doing is. So they don't think like I did. I used to watch folks do this kind of stuff and think it's impossible for us to do something like that.
Right.
You know.
It's kind of like remember the picture of Michelle Obama where the young girl was looking at and saying, okay, hey, I can become, you know, a vice president or a president's wife as well, or even a president.
You can become anything, but you have to have belief, you know, and you're going to lose. I lost a lot of battles along this journey, you know, and got knocked down sometimes. But you know, and I was determined to do something and to be something. You know, at that era, I didn't know what that be something and do something was, you know.
Right.
But I just, you know, I've done a lot of things. You know, I was in one of United Airlines' first classes that accepted African American women. You know, I hated it. You know,
you've done a lot of firsts.
I've done a lot of firsts.
Right.
But I didn't look at it like that. I thought, this is cool. I could do this. It didn't work out, so I'm going back home and start all over.
Now, are you the first African American lady that is a Republican representative in the state of New Mexico?
I'm the first African American that has ever been elected
as a Republican
on a Republican ticket. And then after I was elected,
the first African American that's ever been elected.
That had ever been
not
elected.
just in New Mexico.
No, here in the state of New Mexico.
Here in the state of New Mexico, you're the first African American that was ever
been elected in the House of Representatives.
Okay.
And then after I was elected, we had Conrad James. Who came in. You know, for a short period. You know, after I did. And so I've had an opportunity to be a lot of firsts.
Yes,
but
well, that is awesome.
I just want young people to know. I want families to know. I don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican. I want you to know that if you're voting for me, I'm going to give it my best, and I'm going to represent you in District 44.
Awesome.
But number two is that for every little kid that's out there, that I'm not doing anything that you can't do. Because see, I didn't realize how poor we were growing up, but we were rich in love, you know, and we had a value system that the whole community adhered to.
Oh yes, took a village.
Everybody. You know, the village concept just seemed to grab on. You know, here over the past 10, 15 years. It was a village back in the 50s. It was a village back in the 60s. And you had to follow the village rules.
Absolutely. And you were taught values.
Yeah, you were taught values.
You know,
you were taught respect.
Yes.
And you were taught to be responsible. And you had to be accountable. You know.
And those are values that even to this day, I really appreciate.
They're important. They're important, and that's what we got to get back to.
Absolutely.
So
I agree with you.
You know, it's been a joy to speak with you.
Thank you so much,
thanks for
Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you check her out. Representative Jane Powdrell-Culbert, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for this particular episode of Itching to Vote. We out.